everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your filthy casual place for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am your host, and just yet another filthy casual sports fan, DylanLasagna here, and this is episode number 154 of this icy yet spicy sports podcast for the casual sports fan. Today, we got a good show for you all because we're continuing along with our NFL 2023 season preview month here on the show, and wow, can't believe it. We're like 12 teams left with our season previews, but we got 4 more teams to cover and another division to come along with as we take a look in part 6 of our season previews, the AFC North division. And I gotta say, with this division, I'll get into my thoughts into it actually, but this was a really interesting division to look at. And I know I said that a lot with all the ones that I talked about, but this is gonna be a very intense one to look at so far because it's engaging. This one was really engaging to open my eyes to. But anyway, we'll get into that as we go along with this episode. And yeah, like I said, we're like reaching rapidly towards the end of our NFL season preview month. Only 12 teams left. And after that, we're reaching down to the final 8. And yeah, we got training camp already started around the league. And then we have preseason in August. And then, sooner or know it, we have the regular season. I really can't wait for football to come back, man. I really can't. Because, you know, as much as I liked watching and talking about wrestling here on Very Cold Lasagna on these past couple of months, and honestly, this has been the most engaged I have been with pro wrestling since, like, honestly, forever. Admittedly, like, before I started the show, I guess, in a couple of years, maybe, you know, I've honestly preferred the NFL more so than the WWE and AEW per se. I will say though, you know, in light of these recent events, yeah, there have been a lot of injuries in WWE, so it's like, ooh, like you guys got to be careful there. Really got to be careful there. But you know, speedy recovery to all those people out there that have been injured, and hopefully they'll be back soon. So anyway, yeah, let's get into this episode here on Very Cold Lasagna with a little bit of housekeeping per se. Before we get started, make sure you follow the show on social media, on Instagram, and what's now being called X. It's no longer called Twitter. I don't know why, what Elon is doing. But anyway, you can follow me over there at Very Cold Lasagna. And if you're listening to this on audio, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you listen to it, you can listen to me there and make sure you rate the show, review the show, leave me some feedback because it definitely helps me either give me some good vibes or helps me try to improve the show in some sort of way. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you leave a like, smash the subscribe button, leave a comment, share this with your friends, share this with a stranger, share it with anybody. And yeah, leave a comment on your own takes on what I have to say. So yeah, spread the good word of mouth or the bad one, whichever one, however you feel about this icy yet spicy sports podcast that is called Very Cold Lasagna. So by now you already know how NFL season preview month goes. We talk about 4 teams per episode and what I expect out of them going into the fall. Before we get started with our AFC North season preview, I want to talk a little bit briefly about what's been going on so far early on with training camp. Just not like every single thing that's been going on, but like my notable things that have been happening so far. And this is happening at the time I'm recording this. So anyway, there have been 2 notable injuries that have been going on around the league. And one of them was actually kind of unfortunate, like really unfortunate. One of them happened to Buffalo Bills return specialist running back Nyheim Hines. This actually happened during his off time. He was hit severely by a jet ski in his knee. So, ow. And he's expected to miss the season. It's like he had a jet ski incident. It's like, ow, man. That's really unfortunate. So he's going to have surgery on that knee. It was reported by multiple sources like Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, and a lot of other reporters. Tough. That's really tough, man. I was kind of hoping big things for him. He was going to be a big part of that running game and the special teams for the Bills. That's really unfortunate, man. And then for the Lions, safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson. This was really concerning for the Lions defense because he was one of their big signings. He went down on Monday with a non-contact leg injury, and there's like people like Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter were talking about how he had to be carted off the field, but the Lions got some really good news hours later that he didn't sustain any like fracture damage. So that's really good news for the Lions. They really need that kind of news. So that's really good for them. Some other like non-injury related news before like training camp took place for these teams. Saquon Barkley. I talked about in length how the Giants could have not had Barkley by week 1 in my season preview. It seems like they will because Saquon Barkley signed a 1-year, $11 million deal. So he's not going to be playing under the franchise tag. He's going to be playing under I think it's going to be like a 1-year rental. So kind of interesting there. And then some quarterback news. Justin Herbert signed a big fat 5-year, $262 million contract extension just before the Chargers at the time started their training camp. So that's kind of interesting. So good for Justin Herbert. Hopefully the Chargers supporting cast around him actually helps him this season. Like I said, they don't clipper it up in Los Angeles. Raiders quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, he passed his physical this past Sunday. Coming off that foot surgery, so he'll be full go come training camp. As much as I've ragged on Jimmy G, as a player, hopefully he does big things. Kind of hope like not big things, but try to do as much as you can for the Raiders this coming season. It's just good. I guess it's good to see him healthy. And speaking of healthy, Brock Purdy of the 49ers has been given clearance to at least fully practice at the start of camp. So actually, I take that back with fully. He's still not like daily practicing. He's going to be throwing like every other 2 days. So it's like he'll throw like let's say today, for example, and then the next day, and then he won't throw the day after that second day. So he had the offseason elbow surgery in his throwing arm, so they're still trying to ease him back to be that starter for week 1. So that's your notable training camp updates from me, from the various insiders like Rappaport, Schefter, and other people around the league. So if I have any more to talk about, then you'll definitely be there. But for now, let's get into our topic of the day, and that is our not NFC North. We're on the AFC side. Sorry about that. The AFC North 2023 season preview. So when I sat here in 2022 last year, it was like a changing of the guard of sorts because you had a lot of moving parts in that division. You had a new rookie quarterback in mustard land, and then you had a QB that just got traded into the division within the conference, but he was coming off a really bad, like a really publicized controversy. But you also still had 2 star quarterbacks with star-studded teams on the rise. So you also had one of those quarterbacks being on the team of the defending AFC champions that was just a bit short of winning the Super Bowl that year. So there honestly isn't a lot to say in terms of what happened in 2022 for the AFC North because most of my expectations were met in that year. One of those teams, didn't really perform that well because one of their quarterbacks was missing for most of the year. The rookie quarterback, he played as expected. And then the other quarterback, he dealt with injury again. And then, the team that led the defending AFC champions, they made it back to the big dance, which is the AFC championship, except they fell short of their goal. So now here we are in 2023. A new season is on the horizon in the Central North. That is the AFC North. All the QBs, including the one in the land, will be more fresh, We're ready to go, ready to slug it out, pal. And honestly, when we're looking at this big picture, I think this could be one of the most interesting division races, if not the most interesting division races in this whole upcoming season in the NFL. Why? Well, let's take a look at the 2023 AFC North division. So we begin our 2023 AFC North season preview by taking a look at the team that has finished dead last yet again, and what I feel like they always do in their decades-long history that they've been in the AFC North, and that is the shit stains, the toilet bowl residents, and what most people call the skid marks, the Cleveland Browns. For the Cleveland Browns in 2022, they made the headlines for pretty much all the wrong reasons, mostly, I guess, where they made this massive offseason trade last year to go and acquire Deshaun Watson from the Houston Texans. The quarterback from there. But the only thing was that he was still dealing with the controversial sexual assault allegations that kept him away from the Texans in 2021. And there was still no settlement at the time. So when nearly the offseason was over, the Deshaun Watson and those victims eventually came to that settlement, and the league had to make the decision of how many games Deshaun Watson was going to be suspended for. Multiple games, no games, the entire season. So they eventually settled on 11 games, if I recall correctly. So Deshaun Watson was basically unavailable for most of the season. He was suspended for those allegations, for all those allegations. So pretty much, the Browns were not expected to make the playoffs. It was basically going to be an evaluation season for next year. Who was going to be a good fit around Deshaun Watson once he came back in action? Yeah, basically your typical skid marks year with an asterisk, I guess. So there were a few good players, I guess, but the defense was The defense was mostly and the offense was pretty much just as expected under backup quarterback Jacoby Brissett. But I mean, they still managed to rattle off a couple wins under Brissett. So by the time Deshaun Watson did come back and play, guess who? The Houston Texans. It was pretty obvious that he was rusty after such a long time off. He looked rattled. He didn't know what to do. And to be honest, it was kind of expected, to be honest with you. And it stayed that way for the rest of the way. So the Browns finished 7-10, and now they're looking to hope for a comeback season from Deshaun Watson. That's pretty much their top goal. Regardless of what you think of the man, I mean, I'm not here to tell you what's good or bad about Deshaun Watson. We could talk about that all you want. I'm here to talk about the football perspective, the casual fan perspective of Deshaun Watson and the skid marks. This season is about hoping for a comeback. If you're a Browns fan, hoping for a comeback season for Deshaun Watson. How is he going to do as a quarterback coming off what was a rusty 5 games in 2022 after such a long layoff? So to do that, the Browns had to invest in the interior defensive line because they weren't really getting a lot of help in the inside pass rush because, the only guy there was Myles Garrett, and Jadeveon Clowney wasn't really a lot of help. Speaking of Myles Garrett, they needed another edge rusher because, like I said, Jadeveon Clowney wasn't a lot of help, and he threw a bitch fit on the last game of the regular season, and he didn't even play. They also needed a third option at receiver behind Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones because, the receiving attack, could use some more help there. So looking at some of their offseason moves, I mean, you did lose Jacoby Brissett to the Commanders and backup running back Dearness Johnson. I mean, but those are pretty replaceable. So at least if you're the Browns, those are not big losses. So you can eat those losses. They did re-sign key linebacker Anthony Walker, so a key part of that defense stays in Cleveland, and a big key part of the offensive line, which honestly was not too bad, but could be better. Center Ethan Posick, one of the better offensive linemen for the Browns. And then looking at some of their additions, defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson for the Minnesota Vikings. He was pretty solid for them last year. Safety Juan Thornhill from the Kansas City Chiefs. So a solid foundation for the Browns secondary, which is definitely needed. Ronnie McLeod at safety from the Indianapolis Colts. Receiver, Elijah Moore. So there you go. Big receiver help needed. And they got it via trade from the New York Jets in return for a second-round pick. I do know that the Jets receiving room was getting kind of crowded over there. So Elijah Moore, this is your opportunity to go and show that, hey, I can shine here. And then they also added an edge rusher by the name of Zadarius Smith from the Minnesota Vikings. He also got traded in return for a 5th-round pick. So Myles Garrett potentially finally getting some help here. And then in the draft is where they did their big work. They got another receiver by the name of Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. So they're really beefing up that receiver room. So I like it. Nose tackle Siaki Ika from Baylor. Offensive tackle DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. Edge rusher Isaiah McGuire from Missouri. And never hurts to get a backup quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA, and more. So when you look at the Browns offseason, sure, you can talk all the crap about Deshaun Watson, how he's not a good role model. I mean, again, we're not here to talk about that aspect. We're here to talk about the football aspect. The Browns, and on paper at least, should be much better on defense after they invested so much. They did the due diligence of what was needed in both free agency and the draft, and they beefed up that defensive line. They got some help from Myles Garrett by getting some interior help in Dalvin Tomlinson and a nose tackle by the name of Siaki Ika. I don't know if he's going to be a starter or if he's going to be a rotational piece, but either way, those things should help. And then getting another edge rusher in Zadarius Smith. He was good in Minnesota. Unfortunately, I don't know why he wanted to go out of there, but I don't know. I have no idea. But either way, along with getting some depth pieces like Isaiah McGuire in there, who they also drafted, this pass rush rotation is looking pretty solid for the Cleveland Browns. And looking at the receiver depth too, there's also some solid bright spots as well. Because, as I said, getting Deshaun Watson some help to help him bounce back, to help him shake off that rust completely, was very key. I mean, looking at some of those training camp videos, I mean, it's getting there. He's getting his rhythm back. So I like these moves to go and trade for Elijah Moore and draft more receivers to go alongside Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones. So it's pretty much on Deshaun Watson to go and prove that, yeah, I'm an asshole, but I can still play, even though I'm an asshole. So looking at some of their key games of 2023, obviously the big one is their very first game against a former reigning AFC champion, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the reigning division champion Bengals. So it's an opportunity to try and make a statement against Joe Burrow and the Bengals at home. So the Browns got to make a strong impression here if they want to try to challenge for their division. And actually, 3 of your first 4 games are within the division. And then the very next game, you got to go to Pittsburgh to take on Kenny Pickett and the Steelers. And then 2 weeks later, you got to host the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson and their strong passing attack on paper. So a lot of tough division games to start out the season. And then week 6, you host the San Francisco 49ers. Regardless of who they have at quarterback, you cannot doubt their defense. And even if your offensive line is strong, you never can doubt their pass rush. And then a little bit later down the line, week 12 in Denver against the Broncos. I mean, again, it could be an even battle there. It could be an even battle there between Watson and Russell Wilson. You never know. So some of my questions entering the 2023 season for the Browns, I mean, obviously, it's pretty much the one I've been asking this whole time. Will the Browns get the Deshaun Watson of old? Coming off a full offseason of prep. I mean, you pretty much had 5 games of rusty Deshaun Watson. There were some flashes here and there, but the Browns certainly know that they can get more. So only time will tell, but that's the good thing of the Browns in Watson having this much time, not making the playoffs, because you've pretty much had like about 7 months to get Deshaun Watson back up to speed. So at this point, it's pretty much all on Deshaun Watson to shake off that rust fully, and again prove to the world that my reputation is fucked, but I can still ball. And then looking at the running back position, who's going to be the backup behind Nick Chubb? Because they didn't resign Kareem Hunt, and they didn't. They let Dearness Johnson go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's running backs there, but it's like, who's going to be that next man up? Especially considering that, what if Nick Chubb goes down with an injury? So something to keep an eye on. Don't let that fly under the radar, because Nick Chubb has been the engine in that. He's been that engine in the offense for like a long while, considering that the Browns didn't really have a quarterback until perhaps Watson. So overall, if Deshaun Watson, has these similar struggles as he did when he came back in 2022, then, well, forget the Browns having a bounce back year. Expect them to have maybe a similar record as they did in 2022. But if Watson is able to turn back the clock into his own old productive self, then I do think the Browns, with considering all the moves that they made in the offseason, all these solid moves on both offense and defense, I think they could be a strong X Factor team in this division race. I don't think they'll make a lot of noise in the playoffs, but in this competitive AFC North, they can make some damage. I think they can make some damage as long as Deshaun Watson is back to full speed, back at full go. The Browns, I think they can go 11-6. I mean, that's crazy to say. I'd say 10-7 or 11-6. It's not out of the realm of the possibility that the skid marks may not be the skid marks in 2023. So now we go from the land to mustard land as we talk about the Steel City that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So for the Steelers in 2022, they were ushering a brand new era. Big Ben Roethlisberger was out, and in came in a new quarterback by the name of, a Pittsburgh resident. He technically went to Pittsburgh University, the University of Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett. They were bringing in a rookie quarterback by the name of Kenny Pickett that they drafted, and they were basically biding their time, I guess. I don't know why, until he was ready to go. As such, the Steelers, there were not a lot of expectations going into this season for them. It was just a matter of, when Kenny Pickett was going to start. So the Steelers actually started off pretty cold in the first half of the year as, like I said, they tried to buy time for whatever reason until Kenny Pickett was ready to start his first game. They started Mitch Trubisky. Yes, the MVP, the Nickelodeon Valuable Player, the inaugural one, by the way, for a couple of games until he got concussed. And then you had to insert Kenny Pickett in, and he didn't exactly have the greatest starts because he was playing playoff teams. But the team itself wasn't exactly perfect before he came in anyways. So they did actually manage to catch fire in the second half of the season, thanks to better flashes from both Kenny Pickett and breakout rookie receiver George Pickens. And then it also helped that your defense got back TJ Watt, who missed multiple games throughout the season. But unfortunately, all those early season losses ended up coming back to bite them a bit because they missed out on a playoff spot due to tiebreakers at the very end of the season. So they managed to keep their winning record, their streak of non-losing seasons alive still by going 9-8. So yes, for Mike Tomlin, that's something, but still, it was kind of like, is this really your standard? I think I said that. Is this really your standard of where you want to be in the NFL? Just winning, baby. So if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously you want to do more than that. And your top goal for 2023 is not only to make the playoffs with Kenny Pickett, but hope for a positive year from Kenny Pickett, your second-year quarterback. So to help out your quarterback, some of the things I mentioned in my season recap for the Pittsburgh Steelers was to upgrade the offense around Kenny Pickett, mainly at receiver because, you didn't really have a lot of options which they traded away Chase Claypool. So all you really had was George Pickens, their rookie receiver. And then the offensive line, it still was pretty poor, especially considering, well, that was one of the reasons why Ben Roethlisberger retired. I mean, not only because of his age, but the offensive line was pretty bad. And the offensive line in 2022 was still poor. They also could boost the interior of the defensive line. You had some interior defensive tackles in there. And then the corner spots in the secondary, could also use some work. Cameron Sutton was one of their top free agents, so they either had to re-sign him or just simply upgrade at both spots. So looking at some of their offseason moves in free agency, some people that they lost included was one of those top free agents that they had. Cameron Sutton went to the Detroit Lions. So yeah, they definitely had to go and address the corner spot, whether it was here or in the draft. And they also lost linebacker Devin Bush to the Seattle Seahawks, but fortunately for them, I guess, he didn't really pan out, but hopefully he does on his new team. Safety Terrell Edmonds went to the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, not really too much of a loss there. A couple of re-signings. Defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi. Trying to get my pronunciation there. And then they also re-signed, for whatever reason, third-string quarterback Mason Rudolph. Probably a good dude over there, I guess. But yeah, we've seen the times that Mason Rudolph started as a quarterback for Pittsburgh. Yeah, not good. Free agents. Guard Isaac Seumalo came over from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was a good guard there. Just wasn't able to get a lot of playing time. And then corner Patrick Peterson from the Minnesota Vikings came over. A curious one there, but he's still good despite his age. Linebacker Cole Holcomb from the Washington Commanders. And then the draft is where they did their dirty work. They got a left tackle by the name of Broderick Jones from Georgia. So that was one of their top prospects that they were really looking at. And now they have protection for Kenny Pickett on at least the left side. Corner Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State. So they got what could be one of the top corners in the league. Hopefully he pans out. I know it's kind of bold to say that now, but we will see. They also addressed the interior defensive line by drafting Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, a nose tackle. And they addressed the tight end position too, by getting Darnell Washington from Georgia. So overall, when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers in their offseason, I'd say they had a pretty strong draft. They mainly did their dirty work in the draft, and it should help Kenny Pickett develop pretty nicely, hopefully. Now it's pretty much on Kenny Pickett to pick it up and see if he can progress in a positive manner. So the Steelers did exactly what they needed to do in this offseason. Go and get Kenny Pickett some help, whether it's at receiver, the offensive line. They didn't do so much at receiver, but they did give Kenny Pickett more protection, which is kind of important. Which is because you don't want your quarterback to get injured. Keep in mind, Kenny Pickett got concussed on, I think it was like 2 different occasions last year. And you don't want that to happen to your quarterback that early. He's only a rookie, keep in mind. So he's still pretty young. You don't want that to happen so early. So getting Broderick Jones was essential because you at least protect part of your offensive line. Now, obviously, you want to protect the entirety of your offensive line because now Kenny Pickett needs to have protection when on the blind side to get the ball out. So that remains to be seen. They also strengthened their defense too, especially in the secondary. Getting Joey Porter Jr. was a really good pick for them. And then Corey Trice, I think both of them could be the keys that the Steelers need at corner because they desperately need them. They were getting torched at that position. So looking at some of their potential key games, in 2023, the very first game, hosting the San Francisco 49ers, whoever will be at quarterback for that team. Let's see how Kenny Pickett does against one of the top defenses in the NFL from last year. And then a couple of division games early on in the season. You host the Cleveland Browns the very next week against Deshaun Watson. And then a couple weeks later, you host the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson in that strong on paper, at least. Passing attack. How will that defense fare? And how will Kenny Pickett fare against a pretty solid defense? And then you host the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 8. Trevor Lawrence and the all elite Jaguars. And then a pretty big division game in week 12. You travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals and Joe Burrow. That's a pretty big division game. I mean, took them head on pretty hard in last year. They could certainly do so again. Mike Tomlin and those Steelers play pretty tough, regardless of the record. So, obviously, the question centers around Kenny Pickett in my big questions for 2023. How is he going to look? Because I thought he looked solid. He looked solid in his rookie year, despite not having a lot of protection. He got concussed twice, and yeah, he didn't really have a spectacular group. All he pretty much had was George Pickens, Najee Harris, and a couple other not so known receivers. But the Steelers, I think they took this offseason pretty seriously, at least in my eyes. I don't know about actual Steelers fans, but let me know. I would like to know if they actually did. They at least got Kenny Pickett some help on the offensive line, so they gave him better protection. I just wish they got some more help at receiver. They gave him a tight end though, so now it's on Kenny Pickett to show some stronger development this year. And it'll be a little bit understandable if George Pickens is the only guy he throws to, because he doesn't really have a second receiver. But I would like to see some positive momentum still from Kenny Pickett going into year 2. So overall, there are some tough games for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially within your division, and then you have the Jaguars, and who knows, there might be some other trap games that they might fall into. And of course, you have the very first game against the 49ers. But for the Steelers, I mean, it honestly doesn't look that. It's like a misbagged schedule. And of course, you can't louse up any games that are winnable. So it's going to be an interesting way of thinking of how they could actually win, where they stand. I think they have a good shot of making the playoffs. So maybe 10-7, 10-7. There could be a tie between the Browns, the Steelers, and potentially even the Ravens. So this could be a really interesting scenario. So yeah, I think the Steelers could really make a crack at double-digit wins this coming season, just as long as Kenny Pickett progresses along nicely in year 2. So the next team that we're going to be talking about here in our AFC North season previews for 2023 is, well, we're going to be taking a trip down to the Ravens flock and talk about, of course, none other than the Baltimore Ravens. So for the Ravens in 2022, they were looking to bounce back from what was, the latest case of injury mania running wild in the NFL. And, well, the Ravens were just the latest victim of that in 2021. So they didn't really do a lot in the offseason in terms of big moves or anything other than, trading away their best receiver in Marquise Hollywood Brown. That was kind of a weird move, but I guess it had to relate to money. And they went out to replace him with Rashad Bateman in the draft. So think of that what you will, but it was kind of a curious decision at the time. So going into 2022, when it came to the actual season, it started off pretty nicely for them, despite a lot of injuries and horrid play calling. It was fine, I guess. But then eventually those injuries and horrid play calling caught up to them, including to Lamar Jackson again. And it led to another late downturn, a downward spiral yet again. Not as bad as the downward spiral from the season prior, but still, you don't want to see that. You got a playoff appearance out of it against the Cincinnati Bengals. The problem was you don't have your quarterback. You don't have any top receiving options. It's like you had a good defense, but it's like you don't have anything. You didn't have anything on offense to help you out. All you had was Mark Andrews, and that's it. So they still went toe-to-toe with the Bengals. They went the distance with them, but it's just like, again, you didn't have anything on offense to help them out. Nothing. So the Bengals took down the Ravens. in that wild card game. And, well, now they had some questions to figure out for Baltimore, especially considering that Lamar Jackson was going to be a free agent and he's probably going to command a shit ton of money in the offseason, despite coming off 2 straight seasons of injury. So, obviously, going into their offseason priorities, it basically centered around Lamar Jackson. You'd have had to sign Lamar Jackson to a long-term deal, or you had to trade him. Like it really bugged me to say that at the time. It's like you can't be if you were Baltimore, you can't be at that standstill. And for a good chunk, like a good 2 months, I think, ever since the season ended, the Ravens were at a standstill with Lamar, especially even when they franchise tagged him. So it's like, man, like what are they doing here? What is Lamar doing here? He's like kind of kill himself in terms of the negotiating game. So they never came to a deal there. And then some of my other offseason priorities there was finding 2, if not 3, receiving options opposite Rashad Bateman. Because once Rashad Bateman went down, I mean, Devin Nuverde was okay, but it was just like there's nothing. There was nothing to help out Mark Andrews, the tight end. So they needed a lot of help at the receiving position because there was just nothing good there. And then, they can use some help on the defense that surprisingly did okay in that stretch to the playoffs, starting with the secondary. So looking at some of the key offseason events for the Baltimore Ravens, they finally did the thing at offensive coordinator. They fired Greg Roman, who just wanted to pound the rock with Lamar Jackson, just overly relied on his rushing ability. Like, play calls were literally centered around that. So they finally replaced Greg Roman with Todd Monken, a former offensive coordinator from Georgia, who was coming off winning a national championship with Stetson Bennett. So it'll be interesting how that plays out. And then, of course, the big highlight event, Lamar Jackson being re-signed to a big, fat 5-year contract. Now, I'm a little curious how this is going to work out. As long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy for a full season, this contract won't be so bad. If he can't stay healthy for the full duration of the contract, then, oh man, there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems here. So Lamar Jackson's got to prove he can stay healthy and play at that still elite level that he can, and not overly rely on his rushing ability. So we'll see what happens there. But this is the move that the Ravens had to make. So looking at some of their offseason moves, a lot of it, was basically centered around, until Lamar Jackson could make a move, until they came to the negotiating table and re-signed Lamar Jackson, he couldn't really do anything. And as such, they lost a good amount of key players. One of the key offensive linemen, Ben Powers, went to the Denver Broncos. So he's going to be protecting Russell Wilson there. And then defensive tackle, for as old as he is, Calais Campbell, went to the Atlanta Falcons. And then backup tight end Josh Oliver went to the Minnesota Vikings. Good blocker, but, he's just the backup to Mark Andrews. And then safety Chuck Clark, for some reason, got traded to the New York Jets. I don't know why. Some other re-signings included backup quarterback Tyler Huntley and backup running back Justice Hill, who went down with an injury. And then looking at some of their free agent additions prior to Lamar Jackson being re-signed, corner Rocky Sin from the Las Vegas Raiders. So, hey, at least they're getting help in the secondary. Backup receiver Nelson Aguilar from the New England Patriots. Yeah, him. And then after Lamar Jackson got re-signed, they went out and get some help. They got Odell Beckham Jr., and his last team was the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. So basically, Odell Beckham Jr., coming off a torn ACL, had the year to rehab, like sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. So this is the team that he ends up going to. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I mean, I'm curious to see how this works. So it's not a bad move by the Ravens. It's just we'll see how this works, considering that he had like a whole year to rehab from that injury, probably plus. So, and then they also signed running back Melvin Gordon for depth purposes for the Kansas City Chiefs. But this is like the draft was like a really nice one for the Ravens. They got receiver Zay Flowers from Boston College. Really nice move there. Linebacker Trenton Simpson from Clemson. Edge rusher Tavarius Robinson from Southeastern University. And then corner Q Blue Kelly from Stanford. And they also got another offensive lineman for Lamar Jackson by the name of Andrew Voorhees. Not Jason Voorhees. Andrew Voorhees. Could be his brother. I don't know. Could be a horror fanatic. I don't know. Anyway, he came from USC. So overall, the biggest takeaway I took from this Ravens offseason is that the Ravens are finally getting him some damn help. They're getting Lamar Jackson some damn help at receiver, at offensive line, maybe at the defense. I'm just glad they're finally getting him some damn help, because a good chunk of why Lamar Jackson can't stay healthy is, well, not only his own self, like his own safety in terms of always running the damn ball, but it's like he doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have anybody to go to help him out. Not the offensive line, which, I mean, again, the injury bug, but it's like, it's not great. But especially after Marquise Brown left, no one to throw to. I mean, yeah, especially after Rashad Bateman got hurt last year. So this is one of the keys in keeping and trying to keep Lamar Jackson around long term, because, like I said, no one to throw to aside from Mark Andrews. So now at least they have 3 downfield options with Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr., and of course Mark Andrews. Yeah, this passing attack is going to be at least now doable. This is going to be very doable for the Baltimore Ravens. And now you at least have some protection, a little bit of protection up front if you're the Ravens. So pretty solid offseason for them. Looking at some of their key potential games for the Ravens in 2023, you go to Cincinnati in week 2, and then week 4. A lot of these division games are pretty early for all these teams, by the way. Week 4, you go to Cleveland to take on the Deshaun Watson and the Browns. And then the very next week, you go to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. So for the Ravens, these are a lot of important games in like the first 2 of 5 weeks in your season, because you're playing like half of your division in the first 5 weeks of the season. So if you're Lamar Jackson, if you're the Ravens, if you're John Harbaugh, you cannot afford to lose any of the division games here early in the month. And then much later on in the season, you play Justin Herbert and the Chargers. That could be an electric game, or maybe a downer. And then on New Year's Eve, you're playing Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. That could be an exciting game. So, maybe some early New Year's fireworks there. So my biggest question for the Baltimore Ravens going into 2023 is that, well, are these new additions going to be enough for Lamar Jackson to basically balance out his passing abilities more? More so, whoever's going to be his new offense coordinator. Well, like I said, that's going to be up to them. That's going to be up to Todd Monken. He's got to break Lamar Jackson out of this habit of just running the damn ball out of the shotgun formation. He's got to break him out of that habit of the run pass option. Like, whenever Lamar Jackson snaps the ball, and then he thinks offense is going to think they're going to hand it to the running back. Nope, he's just going to run it. They got to break him out of that habit. I don't mind Lamar Jackson running the ball, but he has to learn how to balance out that passing, his rushing ability with his passing ability. Because we've seen Lamar Jackson as a passer. He can throw a nice ball, but the problem is he has that 70-30 split of wanting to run the ball, and then that 30% is passing the ball. So they really have to have that 50-50 split, or preferably a 60-40 of passing over here. That's the 60, and then the 40 is rushing. So for the Ravens, the key to compete in this very tough division is, they got to stay healthy as possible. They can't afford to get injured again. They can't afford to have injury mania, especially to Lamar Jackson. They can't afford him to lose him for any games. The offensive play calling also can't heavily rely on Jackson's rushing ability anymore. At least not overly reliant, because again, we've seen what happened down the stretch when they overly rely on that. Injury mania. So it's going to be imperative that with the much needed help at receiver, the Ravens coaching staff and Lamar Jackson take full advantage of it if they're going to scrape some wins in a very tough AFC North and the AFC as a whole. Will they do it? We'll see. I expect them to go 10-7. It's going to be that competitive in the AFC North that you could see a lot of two-way, maybe even a three-way tie behind a certain team in that division. So for the Ravens, they got to flock some wins in this crazy competitive division. But more importantly, they have to really stay healthy to stay in the fight. So we're going from the flock to the jungle for our final team in our AFC North season preview. And that is, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals were coming off a surprise 2021 season where they came up just a bit short in Super Bowl 56, where nobody even expected them to be. So in an attempt to make it back to the big game in 2022, they retooled a bit, mainly at the offensive line. So for the Bengals, they were looking to get back to the big game and hopefully this time around win it. But the problem was they looked like they were going to be succumbed to the well-known Super Bowl loser's curse, where a team that doesn't win the Super Bowl the previous season, well, they don't perform as well or even worse the next season. They looked sluggish. They had a lot of mental hurdles, and they overcame a 0-2 start, but they just didn't look right, especially on offense. But at the midway point, they turned it around. They ended their season with a red hot 8-0 start. One of the only two teams, I believe, to have an undefeated second half to end their season. And they made it back to the AFC Championship game. Of course, guess who? The Kansas City Chiefs, the team that they beat, surprisingly, last time around to make it to the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, this time around in the rematch, they ultimately fell one game short of their goal of making it back to the Super Bowl. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, they came up one game short of reaching their goal. And now, when you look at the top goal of 2023, obviously it's to try and make it back to the Super Bowl and this time win it. So looking at some of their offseason priorities to get back to that goal, get back to that point of being in the Super Bowl and trying to win it for win one for Joe Burrow, you have to find some depth on the interior defensive line because they had some trouble early on. I mean, there wasn't any injuries per se, but they had some trouble getting to the quarterback on the inside. They were fine on the edge, but inside, it could use some work. And then they could stand to upgrade at corner because they were getting torched there. And then the offensive line for the Bengals, well, they were mostly efficient in 2022. Injuries really got in the way again, so they had to go and retool. So looking at some of their offseason moves for the Cincinnati Bengals, man, it wasn't a lot of losses, but I felt like it was in terms of who they lost in the offseason. And that was mainly in the secondary. They lost their two best safeties in Jesse Bates and Von Bell to the NFC South. So Bates went to the Atlanta Falcons and Von Bell went to the Carolina Panthers. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit tough to replace them both. But I'm pretty sure that the Bengals can find a way to make it work. They also lost tight end Hayden Hurst to the Carolina Panthers and backup running back Samaje Perine. I mean, he's been pretty reliable. He went to the Denver Broncos. They did manage to re-sign linebacker Jermaine Pratt, a key part of that defense. And looking at some of their additions in both free agency and the draft, offensive tackle Orlando Brown Jr. from the Kansas City Chiefs. So they swiped him away from the team that beat them in the AFC title game. He's a pretty good tackle. So protection on I'm not sure if it's the left or right that he plays, but he should be key in protecting Joe Burrow's blind side, wherever that is, on the edge, in that offensive line that should be back at full strength, hopefully, and protected well. Tight end Irv Smith Jr. for the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't get a lot of playing time because he couldn't stay healthy. That's why they had to go and get TJ Hawkinson. So maybe a change of scenery, and granted he stayed healthy, should help him out. Guard Cody Ford from the Arizona Cardinals. Some depth on the offensive line position, so that should definitely help for Cincinnati. Looking at some of their draft moves, edge rusher Miles Murphy from Clemson, solid move there to add some help at the edge rushing spot behind Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson. Corner DJ Turner from Michigan, definitely some corner competition to grab one of those spots. Safety Jordan Battle from Alabama and receiver Charlie Jones from Purdue. Pretty solid move there to add alongside Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And running back Chase Brown from Illinois. So I'm assuming he'll be the replacement for Samaje Perine. So looking at all these moves that I've talked about, my takeaways for the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason is that, I gotta say, they did well to stock up in the draft. They lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell in the secondary. There weren't a lot of pressing needs to think about for Cincinnati going to the draft. They had they had a really good offensive line, and they got injured. A lot of them got injured late in the season, and they suffered again from a bad offensive line, a makeshift one in the AFC title game. But they went out and promptly addressed that again with the addition of Orlando Brown Jr. and getting some help there. I think it was in the draft. But nonetheless, the defense is where they mainly did their dirty work in the draft. So the draft was basically one best available approach for the Cincinnati Bengals, and they took advantage of it. They went out, got some depth to a secondary group that that struggled at times last year, got some help in the pass rushing rotation. And they also, got some receiver depth, like I mentioned. Charlie Jones from Purdue. He should go alongside nicely whenever Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, or Tyler Boyd need a break in the game. And the offensive line, like I said, it's gonna be key for the Bengals in their Super Bowl hopes. Like I said, Cincinnati fell apart in the AFC title game because the offensive line was broken. It wasn't healthy. So Lyle, especially when they lost Lyle Collins, it was bad. It was bad for the Bengals. So the Bengals need to stay healthy, and especially on the offensive line, because if that one person in the offensive line is out for the whole season, it's done. Their hopes are vanished. So looking at some of their key games going into 2023, you have the Cleveland Browns on the road to start your season. So for the Browns, as I mentioned in my season preview for the Browns, this is an opportunity for them to make a statement on the former defending AFC champions from 2021. But for the Bengals, this is a chance for them to begin their road to redemption once again. And then another division game creeping up in their home opener the very next week against the Baltimore Ravens. As I said, a lot of division games early for everyone in the AFC North. It's man, the NFL really wants the AFC North to really battle in Armageddon. It's like Mortal Kombat. Holy heck. And then potentially a tough one for Cincinnati. Week 8, you go to San Francisco or Santa Clara to take on the 49ers and their rabid pass rush and potentially defense. Their secondary too. The overall defense could look pretty dangerous by the time things come around. And regardless of the quarterback situation, they're always going to be a tough out. And then the very next week, you host the Buffalo Bills in the game that never was last season. I talked about that situation in length. And then week 17 on New Year's Eve, you get an AFC title rematch and potential AFC title rematch for that coming playoffs in the Chiefs. You go to Kansas City to take on them and Patrick Mahomes, potentially a preview of what's to come, and potentially, depending on where they are, it could serve as a tiebreaker for home field advantage in the playoffs. So it could be a big deciding factor there. So some of my biggest questions for the Cincinnati Bengals going into 2023 revolve around the starting safeties because, you did lose Jesse Bates. You did lose Von Bell. These are perhaps your two big holes to fill in the deep middle of the secondary. So training camp, you got to find out who's gonna be your new starting safeties. They'll figure out that answer as the training camp and preseason roll along. And then, are they going to be able to generate more pressure on opposing quarterbacks? I mean, obviously, you know what you have in Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, but I'd like to see more out of the interior pass rush. BJ Hill, DJ Reader, Dominique Davis. I mean, I could be wrong, but I didn't see a whole lot in that interior defensive line. So I really hope they generate more pressure this coming season because, a whole defensive line getting pressure on the quarterback, it could definitely help. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, they already had this balanced roster in 2022. It's just unfortunate that late injuries shortened their hopes at another crack at a Super Bowl. And even though they lost a few big names and at safety, they did well for themselves, adding some depth to various positions and addressing their best available needs. And especially considering that this AFC North and the AFC as a whole is going to be a dogfight for the Bengals. But I do believe that they're going to take the division again. I think 12-5, maybe 13-4 is going to be a realistic shot for the Bengals to obtain the division, and it's going to be hard for them. But I believe they're going to hold on against the likes of the Browns, the Ravens, the Steelers. It's going to be it's going to be Mortal Kombat. This AFC North is going to be literally Mortal Kombat. I'm not going to use the Charles Barkley guarantee, but overall, the Bengals will find a way to win the division once again. Just barely crawl out of that. But I also believe that they'll find a way to make a case to make it back to the Super Bowl in February in Las Vegas. And with that is a wrap on your 2023 AFC North season preview. 3, 2. And with that is a wrap on your 2023 AFC North division season preview and part 6 of our NFL season preview month 2023. So 24 teams are in the books, ladies and gentlemen, and we just got 8 more left in our season preview month. That's going to extend well into August. But hey, that's what we do here on Very Cold Lasagna. But, man, like I said, we're wrapping up towards the end pretty quickly as we got 8 more teams left to go and 2 more divisions left to cover in the AFC South and the AFC East. Damn. But as for the AFC North itself, like I said, this is going to be a dogfight. This is going to be Mortal Kombat. Armageddon. It's really going to be this AFC is going to be Armageddon itself, but this AFC North is probably going to be the toughest in the NFL, at least in my opinion, looking at it right now. But I'd like to know your thoughts on the AFC North division that we talked about here today. We talked about the Browns, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bengals. I'd like to know your opinions, your takes, whether you're a fan of either of these teams or not, or are you just not a fan of football in general. I still like to know your thoughts on all the teams that we talked about here in this episode number 154. I'd like to know your thoughts on either of these teams that we talked about. And with that is a wrap on Very Cold Lasagna, episode number 154. I'm your filthy casual sports host, DylanLasagna, wrapping up this episode of this icy, yes, spicy sports podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. On the next episode, we will talk about the AFC South division, talking about the Jaguars, the Titans, the Texans, the Colts. Yeah, that division down south is going to be oof. It's going to be oof. I'm just going to say it right now. But that's another story for another time. Until then, until the next episode, peace out.